Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Justin, and I'm the young adults pastor at North Metro Church in Marietta, Georgia. We love that you're choosing to connect with us in our home gathering content. And home gathering is essentially something that we do in homes across the city. People come together in the community, they watch these videos, they discuss it, they have dinner, they hang out. So if you're in the Metro Atlanta area, we'd love for you to join us on one of those. You can actually go to our website, and there's a map where you can find a home gathering. But if you're not ready to take that step, or maybe you don't live in the city, we love that you're just choosing to join us in your home or your apartment or your dorm, and we hope that you will have a community, but we hope these videos help you in your journey and your relationship with God. We're in a conversation right now just about this idea of questions. Life's going to throw questions at us. It's going to throw questions at us every season, every step, every milestone. Now, and as you kind of get used to those and you know they're coming, but I believe there's 3 questions that we could be asking, and if we know the answer to those questions, has the power to shape everyone. And we'll be able to answer the other ones a little bit easier. And so today we're just going to lean more into that conversation as we wrap things up with a bigger question, and it has to do with your heart. So thank you so much that you're choosing to join with us. And now wherever you are, I would love for you to just kind of take a moment with us and join us, and we're going to go into a time of worship.
Of the Son of Man, stories of a Savior, a holiness with human hands, a treasure for the traitor. No ear had heard, no eye had seen of the Father, until heaven came to live with me, a rescue like no other. You are worthy, you are worthy of your name. You are worthy, you are worthy of your name, Jesus. I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love, God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. But I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me.
So when I was in high school, I was like pretty much every guy. I did stupid things. I don't know your story. I don't know if maybe when you were a teenager, you were like, I always did some stupid things. But I did. And I was also a good guy. I came to faith. I started following Jesus in middle school. And so I was a Jesus follower, but I was still stupid. And I was still made some bad decisions. I want to tell you about one of those times, but before we do that, I just kind of want to just let you know that a part of why I like to kind of go back and tell you stories is because stories have that power to shape our future, right? And one of the things that comes to our future is just this idea of questions. And that's kind of what we're having a conversation around right now. If you have the chance, you can go back and watch our other two videos. I believe that you have some questions about your future and about your life and things that are maybe just kind of coming down the track or how it's going to all unfold. But what I believe that those are very important questions, but I believe that there are some bigger questions that we could be asking, and if we know the answer to, it has the power to shape all of those other ones. If we know the answers to some of these questions we've already talked about, and we're going to talk about today, that it has the power to not cripple us or to numb us or make us terrified when those questions of the future come of, job or spouse or college or any of that stuff. And so that's kind of what we're going to be wrapping up today in this conversation around the idea of questions. But again, like I said, maybe the past you can kind of shape a little bit of the future you. And so let's just tell you a story. It's the worst prank I ever pulled. It was unintentional, but it was the worst prank I ever pulled. So in high school, I had a great group of friends, still friends with them today, actually, after, almost 20 years. But we kind of made friends, that's a loose word, with this other guy named Greg. And just to be honest with you, I didn't have a frontal lobe yet. Frontal lobe comes in your mid-20s, so I think I'm maybe 17 in this story. Yeah, 17. So just still had that stupid side of me and the guys. And so I'm like, hey, guys, let's hang out with Greg tonight. And they're like, oh, man, we don't want to hang out with Greg. He is just not the best to hang out with. You guys understand what I'm saying. We've all been there. There's just that person when they come, he just kind of changes the dynamics. So we're all hanging out, and I'm like, hey, we should invite Greg. So we invite Greg. And we're at my buddy Matt's house, and we're all kind of hanging out, and one of the guys, he just goes, oh, I have an idea. And I'm like, I already know what this is, but I'm already terrified. And so the way Matt's house was is we kind of had this door that kind of came into the addition. It was kind of the area we hung out. It's where the PlayStation was, and it's where we'd eat pizza and hang out all night long. And so I'll never forget Matt taking some clear fishing string and tying it to the door handle and kind of propping the door open a little bit. And I'm like, what are you doing? He kind of laid the string on the floor. And he's like, just go with it, you'll know. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So we're all hanging out. Greg shows up. We get pizza. We're playing some PlayStation. And right then, Matt kind of gives us the look of like, it's going down. And and Matt's like, hey, guys, I forgot to tell you, did y'all hear about my neighbor that escaped the insane asylum? And I'm like, what? And obviously this is a prank. But I'm like, I cannot believe we're doing this. And the other guys they were like, no, we had no idea. And of course now we're like bantering. We're like, oh yeah, the guy that I think he killed his wife or something. We were terrible. We were 17 years old. We were terrible. And Greg is like, what? And Matt's like, oh yeah. Like he escaped. He got out and he's back in the neighborhood. He's been like roaming the neighborhood. Greg is like, He roams the neighborhood, and he's like, yeah, but it's fine, we just locked the doors, there hasn't been too many issues. He's disturbed a couple of people, and Greg is like terrified. Like Greg is absolutely terrified that we're going to have some psychotic killer show up at the house. So we go back, we're playing some games, and we're hanging out, we're playing PlayStation, and I don't remember who did it first, but someone stood up, and they look out the window, and they're like, what was that? And we're like, what's what? And Greg's like, what are you talking about? Something going on outside? And we just completely make up this whole scenario. And they're like, oh my gosh, I see somebody. I see someone running in your front yard. And Matt's like, turn the lights off. So we turn all the lights off. And we're like, oh my gosh, I see him. Oh my gosh, he's running across the front yard. Guys, just to let you know, there's nobody in the front yard at all. And somebody has the audacity to say something stupid. They're like, oh my gosh, I see something shiny in his hand. Is that a knife? Well, we're kind of doing this. And Greg literally goes, I see him. There's nobody there. Greg's like, I see him. And We're like, oh my gosh, he's running up the driveway, he's running to the door. And like, everybody hide. And so Greg hides behind this kind of rocking chair in the room. He's kind of like cradling like a baby like this. And Matt's like, get down, he's coming to the house, he's coming to the house. And Matt grabs the fishing string and pulls the door open. And Greg literally goes, ah! And passes out on the floor. He's out cold. And we turn the lights on and we're laughing and we're like, ha ha, we got you. Greg? Well, we roll Greg over and his face is white. And he rolls over and he's quickly mumbling as best as he can is, my heart. I need my heart pills. And we all, in that moment, going, oh my gosh, he has a heart condition. And so I quickly am like, where are your pills? I run upstairs, I grab the pills out of his bag, come down, and we get it in his mouth. And I remember even helping him swallow it. And that night kind of just changed all of our lives. Now here's the thing, Greg was fine. He didn't die. I didn't have to go to the hospital. But I just never forget asking this question of what if? What if, in just our willingness to be silly and our willingness to be just 17-year-old boys trying to think we pulled a funny prank, what if we would have killed somebody? Or what even came later down the pipe was, he felt better, his color came back, and I'll never forget him standing up and looking at us and going, I thought you guys were nice guys. I thought you guys were Christians. And he walked out and he left. And that moment at 17 years old, I remember asking myself, what if I just changed his perception of Jesus forever? And after a long, long time, it took about a year, I was finally able to work things out with Greg. I think I apologized almost every day for a year. But I tell you that story because it has the power it changed me, but it has the power to kind of shape where we're going to go today. And one thing we can learn from Greg's story is, what is your heart telling you? What is your heart telling you? Now, unlike Greg, I'm not talking physically, but I'm talking more of that kind of that inner voice of you is, what is your heart telling you? Like, we have those moments where we want to pursue something, we want to do something, we're passionate about something, our heart is broken over something, and our heart is telling us, like, we've got to be a part of this, we've got to do this is the way we've got to go. And either we ignore it, or we're afraid to pursue it, or we kind of quiet it down. What is your heart telling you? And I have no doubt that there are some things in your life right now that your heart's trying to get your attention on. And maybe it's good things like your health. Maybe it is a relationship that you should not pursue, keyword. Or maybe it's just something else. Maybe it's a passion. Maybe there's something in you. Maybe, I'm just making this up, maybe you're kind of behind a desk job every single day that you absolutely hate, but it provides, it's a good job. But your heart is like, no, we need to be doing X. We need to be doing this. We need to be going after that. But the fear overwhelms you. Now, I want to be careful here because I don't think every single person watching should just up and quit their job. But I think there is that fine line of knowing of, hey, what do I do next, or how do I pursue this? And maybe to help you answer that question, we're going to look at a story today from the Old Testament. Now, what we're going to look at today, it's again, I've tried to tell you this as often as I can because I don't know what you think about the Bible. But what we're looking at is it's before Jesus. It's the Old Testament. It's Jewish literature. But it's historical fact. We're looking at an actual person today, of an actual event, of an actual time, of an actual thing that took place. And this is why I love the Bible, is because you can always use it to point back to history. Again, historians use the Bible for a lot of things, even if they don't believe in the Bible. They're not faith-based people, but they still use it. And so what's so crucial for you to understand what we're looking at today is we're actually looking at a group of people, one person in particular, but what's happened is Israel, it was a country. Israel was a country. They were thriving. They had their own government. They had their policies. They had their borders and everything. Well, Babylon comes in about 605 BC, and Babylon takes over. They said, you've been conquered, and Israel is no longer a country. This is huge. And Nebuchadnezzar does his first exile. He does a couple waves. But Nebuchadnezzar, who leads Babylon at the time, he removes the Israel people out of their nation, and he takes them to Babylonian land. And because that was their politics, that was their policy. And when you conquer somebody, you've got to indoctrinate them. And how do you indoctrinate them? You pull them out of their current culture and their current climate, and you take them to the homeland and you indoctrinate them. That was the deal. Well, about 20-ish years later, Persia, this is all historical, you can go look this up. Persia takes over Babylon. And there's a couple kings in place. One of them is King Artaxerxes, and you're going to read about him in a second. But the policy that's put in place of Persia is, hey, whoever we capture, we want their culture. We want them to know that we own them and we're going to have their taxes, but we want their culture. We want them to be living their life. And so what Persia does, they looks at the Israelites and they say, hey, go back to your land. Go back and kind of get back to your way of life and kind of establish things. You owe taxes to us. We own you. But sure, go have your culture. Go have your customs. Okay? So that's kind of what we're stepping into here. It's around like 586 BC. And the Israelites they're back. They're kind of going in waves, and so there's a group of people that are back in Jerusalem. They've actually settled back in Jerusalem. Again, they're owned by Persia, but they're kind of back in Jerusalem, and that's where our story picks up because we have a Jewish guy named Nehemiah who works for the king. So he's not in Jerusalem. He's actually on the staff for King Artaxerxes, and that's where our story picks up. So check this out. They said to me, he's gotten a letter from people in Jerusalem. Nehemiah says, they said to me, those who survived the exile are back in the province and are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates have been burned with fire. Now, we don't understand this in a cultural context, but when you have a city, part of your pride as a city was your wall. It showed defense and it showed strength. So these people come back to Jerusalem and their town is decimated. It's just terrible. It's in rubble. And they have no spirit. They have no energy. They have no pride because their city just looks terrible. And one way to kind of get the energy back up is that symbol of pride, that symbol of strength, and that is in the wall. I mean, culturally nowadays we have like Capitol buildings or maybe a big entertainment venue, and it's kind of a great way for the city to kind of show the way it's thriving. And that's kind of how this is then, is the gate and walls kind of resembled strength, and it kind of resembled that honor and that pride. So he gets this letter from the group that's in Jerusalem, Nehemiah does, and they're just heartbroken because everything's in rubble, okay? So Nehemiah continues, says, when I heard these things, I sat down and wept. He was upset over this. For some days, I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. I mourned. His heart hurt. He was upset. He was sad because this great town, this great city that they grew up in and was their history is just leveled, and it's just full of ruins now, and it has no symbol of beauty or of strength, and it's just really, really sad for him. And so he's mourning. His heart is aching over that. Have you ever mourned over anything? You ever had something go not the way you thought or the way you planned, and your heart was heavy? What was your heart telling you in that moment? Well, his heart in that moment was just heavy, and it was sad. But look at how the story continues with Nehemiah. And in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when drink was brought for him, I took the drink. So his official job was cupbearer. In case you didn't know that, I'm assuming you're familiar with history. Quick recap: kings' food or drinks could be poisoned, so they actually had a guy that would take a sip every time before he gave it to the king, and you would know if he died, then it was poison. It was just a safety thing. That was his job. Don't let the king die, take a sip of his drink. That was his job. So when drink was brought before him, I took the drink and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before. So his heart is heavy while he's doing his work. He's not separating his personal life from his professional life. I have been sad in his presence before. So the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but of sadness of heart. So first off, he's sad in front of the king, which in case you know, this is a no-no. The king didn't care about your personal life. When the king saw you, he was supposed to see honor and reverence. But he is so just distraught, he's so heartbroken that he can't help it. And the king takes notice. He says, hey, you're not sick. So why are you sad? And for the king to talk to him, that's a big deal. They didn't normally have an exchange. It was normally, here's your drink, good to go. You don't know me. I'm going to go back into my room until you need me again. But he's so intuitive. He says, this has to be sadness of heart. What's happening on your face is a reflection of what's going on inside. Your heart's telling you something, Nehemiah. Now, here's the thing about kind of going on at this time with the way the kingship worked is you didn't talk to the king unless the king talked to you. So now he's kind of got a green light now because the king spoke to him, and so he's not going to break any rules. He's not going to be killed. That was actually a true punishment. If you talk to the king at a place, you'd be killed. He has the right to respond to the king. I was very much afraid, but I said to the king, again, cultural context, he's afraid because he's like, okay, I'm taking my shot. You talk to me first. But I said to the king, may the king live forever. So he's just trying to build him up. He said, hey, reverence to you, sir. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? Why would I not be sad, King Artaxerxes? Praise to you, you're my king. But yeah, why would I not be sad when my whole history has just been obliterated? The Babylonians, when they took over, they just destroyed our town. And thank you, you've let us go back. But we didn't know we were going back to such misery. Now look what happens next. This is unprecedented. You don't get this opportunity ever, let alone maybe once in a lifetime. This literally happens, and this is a big moment for Nehemiah. The king said to me, what is it you want? He just told him, his ancestors, the town, all this deal. And the king could have been like, yeah, sorry about that. And just taken his drink and sent him back. He could have been like, I wasn't aware. Or, yeah, that's how Babylon did things. But the king leans in. The king acknowledges him and asks him a question. And not just any question of like, oh, who is the family? No, he says, what do you want? Kings don't ask their subjects what they want. This is an unbelievable moment in history for a king to ask his cupbearer a question. And look how Nehemiah responds. Then I prayed to God of heaven, meaning the king asks him a question, and real quickly, he probably has 10 seconds. He's like, God, be with me. God, give me the question, how to answer this question. God, be with me. Like quickly in his head, he is praying, I'm about to talk to the king. I'm about to answer his question. God, help me. You ever prayed that prayer? Maybe before you're going in for an interview, about to have that awkward breakup, or maybe you're about to ask the big question. You ever had that moment of, God, be with me? That's what Nehemiah is having. And he answers the king. If it pleases the king, again, he's just showing reverence. He knows his cultural context here. If it's okay with you, my Lord, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried so I can rebuild it. What is it that I want, king? Why is my heart broken? Because I really want to go back to my homeland and I want to rebuild my city. And here's what's big. For him to go back and rebuild a city, go back and rebuild walls, depending on who you are, you could see that as a slap in the face to Persia. Because you could see it as, hey, you're wanting to rebuild walls, rebuild your defense so you can build up your military and try to fight us again. And some people took it that way. If you go read the story, you're going to see Nehemiah ends up having a lot of criticism and a lot of naysayers and a lot of people who tried to stop this from happening. But you know what happens? Is that King Artaxerxes grants his request. He relieves him of his job as cupbearer. This is unprecedented. This doesn't happen. He relieves him of his job and allows him to go back to rebuild the walls because that was his cultural context. He actually, there's some documents on this where you actually see Artaxerxes kind of goes back and looks at some precedents that have been set about letting your exiles go. And he does. He says, okay, well, this has kind of been set before and I want to remain truthful to our culture. And so go do that. You have my blessing. And here's what's unbelievable about that. Nehemiah could have died. Nehemiah could have been scolded by the king. He could have lost his job. He had a lot hanging in the balance by taking such a bold stance. And what I want you to think about today is that you have no idea what hangs in the balance of you saying yes to the burden God has put on your heart. You have no idea what hangs in the balance. I would even argue who hangs in the balance by saying yes to the burden God has put on your heart. A few years ago, my wife and I, when we found out we were going to struggle with infertility for the rest of our life, we were kind of praying through adoption or foster care. And neither one of those are bad. I think Scripture kind of backs both of those up. And I was running with my best friend, Austin. And Austin's like, hey, what's going on with the child stuff? What are y'all thinking? And I was like, we're praying through foster care. And Austin, in his just great humility and his great friendship to me, he looks at me and he says, I don't think you have to pray about things that God makes clear in Scripture. Guys, it was like a gut punch. When I am running, I don't stop until I hit my goal. I had to stop in that moment because my heart was broken in what he said. You have no idea who hangs in the balance of what God puts in your heart? Well, I can tell you now that I know for a fact 4 children would have hung in the balance. 4 children would have hung in the balance if we wouldn't have said yes to that. My wife and I have had the pleasure, the honor, the hard times, the good days and the bad days of fostering 4 children now. That's who hung in the balance by us saying yes to what God put in our heart. Who or what hangs in the balance of you saying yes to the burden God's put on yours? And I'm not making any of this up. Maybe it has to do with students. Maybe you're a part of a church and you care about the next generation, but you've been too afraid to serve. Maybe there's some students that there's an 8th grade girl right now by your story and by the things you went through in high school that is going to shape her story. Maybe it's going to serve on a mission trip. And I know that can sound like loaded language, but I'm being honest. Maybe there's a group of people that God has put on your heart that you care about. And maybe it's a cultural thing, or maybe for some of us young adults who go to Blue Skies in the summer, it's childhood cancer. Maybe there's a group of people that God has put on your heart, but you keep saying no because you're so afraid of how it's going to make you feel. Let me be honest with you, you have no idea what hangs in the balance. You have no idea how 1 minute or one conversation or one thing that you say yes to could shape someone's future. I believe now that the children we've fostered, and 2 of them were actually still in their lives. It's unbelievable. One of them is still with us, and the other one's become our godson. And that's just the nature of foster care. The other 2 are got and placed into kind of a different forever home. Foster care just has its own ups and downs. But 2 of the boys are still in our lives. I can't imagine what their future stories are going to look like because God's allowing us to play a role in it. What our futures are going to look like because of them. So I'm telling you, what you say yes to, it can be huge. So let me ask you, what breaks your heart? What breaks your heart? I want you to think about this. And right now in our cultural context, a big thing that possibly you could answer the question that is sex trafficking. That is a big deal in our city, by the way. Atlanta is one of the top cities in the globe for sex trafficking. Maybe it's children. Maybe it's students. Maybe it's families with special needs. I don't know what breaks your heart, but I have a feeling there's a who attached to it. And I'm telling you, you have no idea what hangs in the balance by you saying yes to it. The future that you could tell, the future that they could tell by you saying yes to it. Nehemiah goes and they rebuild the city. They rebuild the city wall, and he does it. No joke, he goes it by going house to house and casting vision for this thing that breaks his heart. And essentially, every home, every family would kind of walk out at the end of their driveway, so to speak, and they would repair the part of the wall in front of their own house. He got the whole city, the whole community involved, and they did it together. And it's unbelievable what can happen when one person says yes to things that break their heart. What breaks your heart? And when you start thinking about what breaks your heart, I want you to think of 3 kind of sub-questions that can go with that and shape that. First off is, what if you realize that God could use anyone? Maybe part of why you don't pursue what it is you want to pursue is you think, oh, you've got to be professional, or you got to be a pastor, or I got to go to college first, or you literally think that like you're not qualified to do that. Nehemiah had no construction degree. I didn't go and study things of how to take care of children and foster care. Now I got trained. When I said yes to it, we got trained, and that was unbelievable. But don't let this question stop you. God can use anyone. God can use you. God could absolutely use you to change one life. One life, that's worth it. God could change you to change a city. You never know until you say yes. Maybe something else you could be thinking about is, what if you say yes to the burden on your heart? What if? What is that if? Think about it. Seriously, think about it right now. What is that big if that could change if you said yes? What is that if that will stay true if you say no? And then lastly, what if your yes can change lives? Seriously. Start putting names and faces to it. What if your yes can change lives? What breaks your heart? Yes, you have questions. Future job, future spouse, and where am I going to live in that city? I get it. I've been there. I still have some of those questions. Those questions never stop. But if we can answer these bigger questions, it will shape those. Because you won't take that job when you know it doesn't line up with what breaks your heart. You possibly won't move to that city because God's broken your heart for another city. When we have the answers to these three questions that we've kind of talked about in this conversation over the last 3 weeks, I'm telling you, it has the power to shape your future in ways you don't understand. Who are you? What story do you want to tell? And what breaks your heart? If you know the answer to those three questions, the other questions that come along your way, they'll be so easy, or easier to answer. I'm telling you, your future and the future of others hangs in the balance. Let me pray for you. God, thank you that you use us. You partner with us. You trust us with our lives and the lives of others. And there's things that you do, obviously, and that's amazing. But there's things you've put inside of us. There's passions you put inside of us. There's desires you've put inside of us. And we've got to check our hearts. There's the selfish ones and the greedy ones and the ones that care about our own name and recognition. And I pray that we will just continue to silence those things, because our names won't last forever and our recognition will fade away. But what breaks our heart, Father? Why did you put certain people or certain things on our heart? Because you want someone to do something about it, just like you wanted Nehemiah to do something about it. So I pray right now for anyone listening to this, for a generation to answer the call of what's breaking their heart. And futures and stories and lives are changed. And that's the people we become known by what we do. In Jesus' name, amen.